we're going to be diving a lot deeper into the Postman VS Code extension. So the Postman VS Code extension is a really interesting feature that has been come out in the last year, and we have some of my great colleagues, Giri and Pankaj. Giri, who is a product manager for the VS Code extension, as well as Pankaj, who is one of the engineering managers. Did you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves as we get started? Pankaj?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, my name is Pankaj Khandewar. I'm currently heading the ID platform team, and this team is the one who is responsible for creating the VS Code extension.
Awesome. And Giridhar, did you want to introduce?
Hey, yeah, sure. Thanks, Pooja. Hey, folks, this is Giridhar. You can call me Giri. I'm a product manager with the Postman API client team, which is also partly responsible for, helping the ID team build the VS Code plugin. You can see me active on GitHub and other places. And if you have any feature requests or anything, probably I'm the person to reach out to with respect to the API client. Super excited to see you all here, and I can't wait to hear from you.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for introducing yourself. I think today this feature is relatively new, and I'm glad to work with you both since you have been kind of on top of this feature from the get-go. I wanted to introduce myself as well. My name is Pooja, and I'm a dev advocate here at Postman. And I get the chance to work with both of you two to kind of like come up with a really interesting agenda and showcase some of our features to our community. So before we get started, we will first kind of get a little bit of understanding to learn a little bit about you as well. We'll dive into the VS Code overview, and you'll get like a deep understanding of how to work with the feature. And then finally, we'll be sharing some resources and just kind of learn from you as a community as well on how we at Postman build our features and our products. So let's go ahead and get started. So what exactly is Postman's VS Code extension, and why did we create Postman's VS extension? So with that, I wanted to hand it off to Giri to kind of talk a little bit about what exactly it is and kind of what enabled us at Postman to go about creating it. So Giri, did you want to share any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So Postman's VS Code extension is a full-fledged multi-protocol API client that sits right inside VS Code so that you can test and develop your APIs right from VS Code itself. So it's an extension that you can install in your VS Code that will help you do everything that you've been doing with Postman right inside the VS Code platform itself. So typically people use this to debug APIs, write scripts, write test assertions that'll help them test their APIs and share their APIs with the team. And all of that you used to do with Postman already, but inside the VS Code platform. Now, moving on to why we built it, at Postman, we believe that Postman should be accessible to everyone irrespective of the platform you're in. And that's why we have the app in all three major platforms, that's Mac, Windows, and Linux. We did take this a step further and release Postman for the web last year. But over the course, what we realized was most of our developers spend time in the the code editors and the IDE itself. And VS Code being the most popular editor out there, we also had an opportunity to, VS Code also had this extensible, platform where you can build apps on top. And this seemed like the best place to put Postman in, where users are already, in VS Code debugging their, their code, their APIs. And how cool would it be to have Postman right next inside VS Code itself? And we were super excited when we started building, and you would see this in action as we go forward in this webinar.
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to just share some insights of a specific survey that we recently took this year, the State of the API report for 2023. We've surveyed over 40,000 respondents, and you can take a deeper look into the survey as well. But it looks like for in terms of personas of people that work with API specifically, mostly we noticed that there were developers developers. And it seems like that's a great reason for us to kind of work on the VS Code front as well. So I know Pankaj had shared some data, especially on the VS Code developer survey. Did you want to share any thoughts there as well?
Yeah, sure. So it's something similar to what we do for the state of API, right? Even Stack Overflow has some similar survey every year where they kind of understand like how the developers are working on, what are the tools they're working on, what are the technologies they're working on, right? And one interesting thing that came out of this particular survey was that if you see the ID part, right, like how many developers are using what kind of IDs, right? You see the majority of the chunk, and I think if I remember correctly, somewhere around like 70 to 80% of the market share for the Visual Studio Code for the IDs is essentially kind of owned by Visual Studio Code, right? So this was again a no-brainer for us to kind of make sure that we focus our development efforts on first on the Visual Studio Code, because that is where we have a great chunk of people working on the IDE, right? And also you mentioned, right, the state of API report that you shared, right? Like the majority of the people who are using Postman are, like I said, or the APIs are working as a full stack developer, right?
Yeah.
And third thing that also kind of solidified this decision was something what Giri mentioned a bit before, was that the ecosystem that the VS Code provides for the API for the extension development is pretty mature. So if you go to the marketplace of the VS Code, right, you'll see like a million of extensions available over there. So all these three things kind of kind of contributed for us to start with the VS Code itself. And that is how we kind of released the extension somewhere like 2 months back, with a good set of features, which is kind of we can say a Postman API client inside the IDE.
Right.
If I talk about the VS Code features, right, so it has all the capabilities of creating collections, environments. You can just debug your request locally, and so that like you don't have to switch any kind of screen, and you don't have to like, switch your screen to go to a different to a Postman app to test out and debug locally, right? Again, whatever things that you create is synced with your actual to the cloud. So essentially, if you are working in VS Code and if your team member is working in a Postman app or a Postman web, all of those collections or environments or even history that you create will be available in all of those platforms, right? That is where the sync collection, the collaboration comes into effect.
Yeah.
The other thing there is it's not only an HTTP client, it's also a multi-protocol support it has, right? So apart from just creating and testing your API, HTTP APIs, you can also go ahead and check whether if you have a WebSocket or a gRPC APIs, right? So that support is also available in there. And then we have other features like you can go ahead and do a curl import. So essentially, if you have a curl script, you can just go ahead and import it, and it will just create a Postman request out of it, and you can send it, right? So it kind of minimizes the loop of testing out any kind of APIs that you might have.
Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah. So if anyone is interested, I actually posted a couple of blogs in the chat. So it looks like I posted this chat of introducing the VS Code extension, just if you wanted to get introduced with it, as well as some thoughts on some of the features that we talked about. And in this session, we're going to be diving into these features live as we go there. And I think, Pankaj, you had mentioned a little bit more about the VS Code marketplace. So did you want to chat a little bit on like how to get started? So with installing VS Code and going from there?
Sure. So there are two places where you can get the VS Code extension, right? So this is the one place which is like you can go to the VS Code marketplace at the link. If you can just post the link to the wide audience, that'd be great. So you can just click on the link, open this will open in the browser that you have, and you can just go click on install. And when you click on install, it will just go ahead and install that extension in your VS Code instance that is running, right? The other thing is that is something that we'll cover in the VS in the demo itself. So wherein I'll just showcase like how people can just go ahead and do the same everything directly there in their ID itself.
All right. And okay, so in that case, let's dive right into the demo and kind of see in person and how we can kind of get started with that. So I'll hand that off to you, Pankaj, if you wanted to drive your screen, and we can kind of go from there.
Sure. Let me start sharing my screen and let me know if it is visible.
Yep. And before we get started, there's one question that I wanted to address, and maybe Giri can help with this question. So the question that we had, which is from Mark, is, are there any advantages and disadvantages in terms of VS Code versus using Postman? I think maybe we can answer this question as we kind of go forward with the session, but just any like high level thoughts there that you might want to share.
Yeah, sure. So the VS Code extension is a work in progress. So we don't have exactly all the features that's available in Postman. So these are things like runner is not there yet, which we are working on. That will be released in a couple of more weeks. And a few other things like public API network and few things that are not there. But otherwise, the Postman extension on VS Code is very similar. At least the API client part is very similar that you see on the Postman app and the extension. As far as advantages of using the extension, surely having access to Postman in your VS Code is, at least we feel, is far more productive in terms of like developer productivity. We have found it to be super fast and super helpful just having the extension right on site. But yeah, we would love to see how you use it and how you feel about this.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a great way for us to kind of see it in action. So with that, Pankaj, let's go ahead and dive right in. You might want to zoom in slightly just to kind of see a little bit better. There we go. Cool. All right.
Fair enough. I hope the screen is visible. Right. So before we start with the demo, let me help the wider audience understand that what we are trying to do over here is that let's say we have a sample Express.js nodes app, and which has the capability of creating a node, deleting a node, and updating the node and getting all the nodes that is available in the database, right? And we'll see like how does the VS Code Postman extension helps us in removing any kind of friction that might be there in the API development process, and also any kind of screen switching or context switching that might be there, right? So before we get into the extension thing, let's try to understand what exactly happens currently when you're working with the an existing APIs and a Postman app, right? So let's say this is the node app that we have, and there are a few set of routes that is there. So just to give you an idea, right? So these are the few routes, which is like essentially this is a post route which can help in creating a new node. This is the one which retrieves all of the nodes, right? So currently, let's say if you want to check out and see like what are the different nodes available in the database, so all you need to do is go to the Postman app. I have one Postman app running, create a new request, type in the localhost URL that you have, and then again, if you kind of don't remember like what the port it is running on, right? And before that, even I need to kind of run the server. So let me just go ahead and run the server, right? And if you see the port that it's running is on 3000, then again, you have to switch back to Postman app, right? The port number and then send, right? Again, I think I didn't add the route name. So I'll just go ahead and add the route. And that is where you see that there's no nodes available, right? Again, if you want to just go ahead and see like, how do you add a route, right? So you again have to come to the screen, check the add a new post. You go ahead, you just need to add this post, and then again you just need to create all those body and everything to create a route, right? But what if there's a simpler way, a more refined way, wherein you can just do everything on the VS Code on the IDE itself, right? So that is where the VS Code extension comes into picture, right? So to get started with the extension, all you need to do is just go ahead over here and search for Postman name. So this will list all of the extensions that's available. All you need to do is search for the extension which has a blue check mark. So it means it's a verified and it's an actual original Postman VS Code extension. Click on it, install it. And the moment it gets installed, right, on the left-hand side and the sidebar, what you'll see is a Postman logo, right? Now, when you click on the Postman logo, this will greet you with the login screen, right? All you have to do is go ahead, sign in if you have an account. If you don't have an account, you can just go ahead and create account, and it will take you to the create account flow. Because I have an account, I'll just go ahead and sign in, right? So this will open, ask you to open it in an external website. So over there, what you can do is go ahead and complete your sign-in flows. So I'll just go ahead there and let this thing complete. So I'll just select this particular account. So once the login flow is completed, right, it will again ask you to go back to the VS Code extension so that the whole thing can be completed, the whole workflow can complete. So I'll just click on it, it just comes back, I'll open it, and then this will load all of the workspace, the last used workspace that you had, right? So in this case, the last workspace that was used was the Express APIs. So something similar will be loaded in here itself, right? Now, again, if you want to now test it out, all you need to do is just create a new request, right? So we have either you can just go ahead and click on HTTP to create a new request, or what you can do is just use the shortcut, which is Command Command N, and it will open a new request for you, right? Again, what we can do is something similar that we did in the Postman app, which is localhost. Now, if you remember that we actually sent a history in the Postman app, right? And that is if you go to the history tab, those history that was sent in the Postman app starts appearing in the Postman extension also, right? So that is what it means. Like we have like everything is synced with your Postman cloud. So essentially wherever or whichever device or platform you're working in, your data, your work stays with you, right? So we'll just go ahead and use the same URL to get all the APIs all the nodes that we have. And what I'll do is I'll just click on send. Okay, so essentially it means that we don't have any nodes available, right? But what if you want to add a new node, right? So again, what you can do is you can just create a new request, right? I'll just do one thing because we want to see what are the expectations of how do you want to create a new node. Let me do one thing. Let me split this thing, right? So what you can do is you can get the idea about what the new node creation looks like, and I can just expand this and see what is required. And simultaneously, I can start working on the Postman app screen also to understand like how we can create a new node, right? So essentially what it needs is that the method should be post. So let's go ahead and make it post. The base URL is again the localhost URL, and the route should be /nodes. So we can just reuse this. The other thing that the post creation requires is the body, which should have content. And I think then it should also require a title. So it needs a title and a content to create a node, right? So what I'll do is I'll just change this to body. I'll change this to raw. I'll change the language to JSON, right? I'll go ahead, I'll add title, which be, let's say, my first row. And the content can be maybe this was added in the webinar. All right. Now I have created my body. All I need to do is just click on send. Either I can click on send, or you can have use a shortcut, which is Command Enter, and this will send a request to the API and will create an API, the content, right? Now the node is created, and this is what the response looks like. You have the title, content, ID, and what are the creator rate. Just to check whether this was actually created, I have a MongoDB running. So I'll just go ahead and click on it, click on the nodes. I'll just refresh this. I'll just click on it and see if you see this. This is what was returned by this thing, right? By the API, the title, the content, and all the IDs and everything. So this is how it essentially, decrease the time to create APIs, debug those APIs, and test it out.
Yeah.
Similarly, if you just want to delete this, let's say this particular node, right? And the route for this API is /nodes, and then the variable part, which is the node ID, right? So again, what I can do is just go ahead. Let me go ahead and create another tab. Shift it over here. I'll just go ahead, add this local nodes. Because it's a delete, so I'll change the method to delete. We have whole sort of support for any kind of methods that you have right now. So we have like the majorly used one, which is like get, post, put, patch, and then there are some custom ones like copy, link, uplink, and so on, right? So in this case, what we need is delete. I'll just go ahead. I think we also need the node ID, so I can just go ahead over here, copy the node ID from here. Add this node ID. And then click on send, right? So this is the node got deleted successfully. If I check in here, I refresh this and see there's no document available, right? So this is how easily you can just go ahead, debug the APIs and test it out.
Yeah.
Any questions before we proceed?
Yeah, so this looks really great. And I think just to summarize here, it looks like not only are you able to do your development in one place, but you're able to use multi-panels with VS Code extension to work with any of the routes that you've set up. So I think like the reason why we created it like this is to provide this one place rather than switching back and forth. Is that right?
Exactly.
Right. So go ahead.
Yeah, if you see like I didn't have to do any kind of just switch between the tabs so that I lose any kind of context, right? Everything is happening in the ID itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so some of the questions that we have been getting, maybe this is a good time for us to address them. Some questions that we've had about basically about logging in. So did you want to chat a little bit in terms of like why we've set it up that way? I think the idea here is to also sync it with the web client, correct? Right?
Yeah, so the idea behind logging is that we provide because the whole lot of things happened around collaboration, right? So we want to make sure that the people, because normally developers and everyone work in a team, right? So whatever collections that you create is kind of synced with your the Postman app, all of the Postman app, right? So if your teammate is working in another device, right, they don't have to recreate whole collections to test it out, right? You create one collection on your VS Code extension, it gets synced, and if a person is not working, maybe on it's he or she is working on a Postman app or a Postman web, right? So it's just available over there, and they can just start working it from there itself. They don't have to go through the whole loop of creating collections, creating environments, and then start with the development process.
Yeah. And maybe this is a question that maybe Giri can answer live as well in terms of like who are the users of this particular feature like of the VS Code? Like currently it's available for non-enterprise teams, correct?
Yes. So we've currently opened it only for non-enterprise teams. So we can say that VS Code is in beta probably, but we don't call it beta yet, but it's less than V1 if I'm not wrong, Pankaj. But yeah, it's not available for enterprise users yet. So we are still building all the features that are required to make this enterprise ready, upon which we'll open this up. So if you're a non-enterprise user, you're welcome to try this out. And if you're an enterprise user, you can try this out with your personal account or some other ID that your org might allow.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then in terms of like which version, is there a specific version that Visual Code Studio Code needs to be to use this extension? Do you guys know any thoughts on versions as well?
Yes, so for the Visual Studio Code version, so you need to be on a version 1.74 or greater on that, right? You should be able so that you can access the VS Code extension, the Postmans. Yeah.
Awesome. So just to summarize from this point onward, so you can go either install VS Code from the marketplace or install it directly from VS Code itself. You want to click on the verified one. I saw that there were so many different types as well. So these were some of the non-verified ones as well. So make sure you're selecting the verified Postman VS Code. And then you can kind of see how you can use it in multi-panels to do your development workflow as you're kind of testing. So yeah, I'd love for you to kind of keep diving a little bit deeper and specifically on the testing front and the debugging front. How do developers test and debug using this extension as well? So we can kind of go from there. That sounds good.
Definitely. So if you think, let's come back to the one before we were like fetching all the nodes essentially, right? So let's say if you want to add some test in here, right? So before if you want to add some test in terms of like we want to measure whether this particular API is kind of returning within like 200 milliseconds, right? So what you can do is just go ahead, just click on the test tab, right? And if you either you can select one of the snippets that is available in here, or you can just go ahead and write your own snippet or whatever test you want to add, right? In this case, let's say we want to check whether the response time is less than 200 milliseconds, right? You can just go ahead, add this test and send again, right? So if you see this, right, Let me just expand this bit.
Mhm.
So again, the request, if you see the time it took was 11 milliseconds, which is well below 200 millisecond threshold that we have added. And if I switch to the test results page, this is where you can just see that the response time is less than 200 milliseconds, and the test that we have added passed essentially, right? Let's say if I want to see how the things fail, right? So let's say I want to check whether this returns status code as 200. Now this will return status code at 200 because you already have it. Let's change this test to maybe like status code is 404. Right. And if I send this again, right, so this will fail, right? Because the expected one is that it should return 404, but the status code that was written was 200. Right. So you can add all sort of tests that you want to add, right, in your request, something very similar to that what we have in the Postman app, right? Another thing that we have is, let's say you want to add a console log to understand when exactly this request was run and what values it was run, right? So that is where you can go ahead and add some console log, right? And you can just say, let's say that get all nodes request about to run, right? I'll just go ahead and run this, right? But if you see that none of these tabs display the log that we just added, right? But then where does it get displayed, right? That is where Postman console comes into picture. All you need to do is just go to this tab, and if you'll see an icon in here, right? And when you click on it, this is where the Postman console is present. And if you see, this is where it got logged in. Right.
So one question on that is like, is there any shortcuts to view that console? I think we have a question specifically on shortcuts. So
I think we had a shortcut. Let me just check. Yeah, so we have command P. So if you hover on the console thing, right, it says open Postman console, and there's a shortcut over there which is command P. So let's say I'm on terminal, or maybe like close it out, and if I press command P, it just opens your Postman console.
okay, great. So just
But,
go
yeah,
ahead.
one neat hack here is, because we've integrated the Postman console with the terminal itself, you don't have to actually remember this shortcut. So you can just open the terminal, the VS Code terminal, through the usual shortcut that you're used to with the muscle memory, and you can just navigate to the Postman console. So that's another way you can access console quickly, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying that if you were to open up just the VS Code terminal, you should also see Postman console as a tab in there as well, because you've installed that extension, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Awesome. Yeah.
Now coming to the aspect is that let's say we have done all of our debugging and everything, and we know that the things are working fine. But the next thing is, how do we make sure that we kind of share all these requests with our teammates, right? And that is where the concept of collections comes to the picture, right? All you need to do is that go ahead to the collections tab. Either you can create a new collection from here, which will create an empty collection, or you can do is create a collection from here by clicking on save. And because you don't have any collection here right now, so what I'll do is I'll just go ahead, create collection from here. I'll just name it Notes API. I'll click on it. So if I remember correctly, this is the one which gets all the nodes. So I'll just go ahead, get all nodes. Click on this so that we can save it on this, and click on save, right? So essentially this saves my collection, this saves my request, get all nodes to the Notes APIs. Similarly, what I'll just go ahead and do is save this one. I'll click on this, I'll click notes, I'll name this as create a new node and save it. Right. So we have get all nodes, create a new node, and the last one that is pending is, let's go ahead, name this as delete a node. Click on the collection that you want to save in, and just click on save. Right. So now we have all of the nodes, all of the APIs. I'll just ignore the rest of the 2 So it's for the sake of the demo. So we have 3 APIs that we kind of work with, and then all of them are available, right? And which is something like you can share with your teammates, and they'll be able to work on this. One thing, if you have noticed, is that one thing that got repeated essentially was the base URL part, right? So essentially every of these request had the base URL hard coded essentially, right? That is where I feel the environments can come as a help for us, right? So essentially what we need to do is we can copy this one and create a new environment of it, so that if any other person or the teammates are working in any other, let's say, working with any other ports, they can just go ahead and change the port of the environment of the localhost, and they can start working with it, right? To give you an example, how you can create an environment is like, let's say you can just go here and you can select the no environment part, because you don't have any environments right now. We'll just go ahead and create one. Okay. So this will open a new environment thing. I'll name it a localhost there. And I'll add the name of the environment as space URL. Initial value can be localhost and the current value can be localhost, and save it, right? Now what I need to do is just go to any of the requests, select the newly created environment and replace localhost as base URL, right? And that is where it just gets saved. If I click on send again, so that is, it will return me with the, because I don't have any nodes right here, so it will return with an empty array. Similarly, if I just go ahead and I'll change this to base URL, save it, send it. The node content cannot be, so I'll just go ahead, create the title. Save this, send this, so I have the data available, right? So if I go over here again, you'll see one request. So yeah, that is how you can essentially, go ahead and, if there's something that is getting repeated across your environments, across your requests, you can just create an environment out of it. And then you can that is available for other people to, go ahead and change it according to their requirements, right? So yeah, that is where the whole concept of collections and environments come into picture.
Yep.
And
so
let's say,
not only can you set those variables as environment variables as well, right? Like you can also set them globally and on a collection level.
exactly. So we have this concept of globals and collection levels also. So if you go ahead over here and see, so I have sample one. So you can just add a new global level one, so which will be available across your collections. And you can also some of the collection variables on the collection level itself, right? So you can just go ahead and create your variables in here, which will be available at your collections level.
So just to give our users a little bit of insight. So what is the benefits of using environment variables in general? Specifically in VS Code as well. Like, is it mostly to work with multiple different, I guess, like layers of environments? Is that like if you wanted to work production layer or test layer, you can kind of share environments accordingly? Is that correct?
Maybe I can answer the question. So there are a couple of dimensions to how you can use an environment. So one is what Pooja that you mentioned, where if you have a particular base URL that is different between different environments. Let's say you have a separate base URL for production. Let's have, say, a separate base URL for beta and stage and any other environment you have. What you do is create 3-4 environments and ensure that these variables are there in all these environments. And now when you send the request, you can switch between environments to ensure that your requests are going to the specific URL that's relevant to the environment that you've selected. Now, another way you can use variables is to basically, so variables have this initial and current value. So this is slightly like an advanced section that I'm probably gonna cover right now. So variables have this initial and current value. The initial value is shared with all the users that are in your team, but the current value is just for you. It's not stored in Postman. It's not stored anywhere but your machine. So what we've seen users do is if they want to store secrets, they create a variable, leave the initial value empty, and keep something in the current value. So this way you get to share your requests. So let's say you have like an API key or something, and you don't want everyone else to know. So what you do is you would add an API key over here, leave the initial value empty. You can optionally have it secret in case you want to mask those values on the screen. you would leave the initial value empty and have something on the current value. Now, this would resolve when you send the request. This would keep the API readable for someone else who's seeing it, but you won't be sharing your API key by mistake to someone else. If you want to see this, you can actually toggle with that button, but this is a slightly more advanced use case of using environment variables and variables in general. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. I think this was really interesting in general. I think we have one question from the chat as well in terms of using like code snippets, like curl requests. Did you want to kind of show in terms of like code gen, or importing or working with curl, anything like that?
Definitely, we can like touch base upon both of them. So because if you remember, we created this API which was to get all the nodes, right? So if you click on code, this is where it generates all of the possible, code snippets for all the languages that is supported, right? So we have curl. If you click on this, you can select one of those languages. Let's say we select Node.js, right? You can just go ahead, select this, and it will give you a code snippet for this particular Node.js with the Actions library, right? So all you need to do is just click on it, and because you're in the ID itself, all you need to do is just go ahead, click a new file, maybe, and just start pasting it and start working with it, right? So that is how easy it is. Right. Now coming to the curl part, right? Let's say I have a VS Code itself, a browser essentially, and I go to postman.com. Let me open the. Let's say this is there. So if I go to the network tab, I see some of the requests going on, right? If I, let's say, go ahead and copy this as curl. So I have a curl command for Postman get, right? So I can just copy that curl from here, go ahead and import curl from either from here, or we also have a command palette. You can just search for import curl, click on it, paste the thing that you copied right here, and this just opens the same thing with in your Postman request thing, right? So the whole curl got resolved, and you can just send it over here. So that is one way. The other way is that you can just create a new tab, right? And because in this URL tab, if you go ahead and save that curl request, right, this gets resolved directly into your Postman request, and you can just go ahead and send it.
I noticed that Pankaj is using a fancy shortcut to create a new Postman window every time. Maybe we want to share that.
Definitely. So there are like multiple ways of creating a new request, right? So one is something very similar, easy, is that just go into this particular area. So based on the last thing that you use, it will create a new thing. You can just go ahead and click on HTTP. So that is one of the way, right? The other way is that we have a shortcut, which is command N. So this is another way of opening a new request. The another thing that we have is if you go to click on file and click on new file, right? Even over here, you will see another thing, which is a create new HTTP request, right? So that is also a place where you can just go ahead and create a new request. And there's one more, which is the last one, which is if you're a power user of Postman of the VS Code, right? And you'll be very much familiar with the command palette. So you can just go here, search for create a new request, create a new HTTP request. And if you see, this is the one. If you click on this, that is where it opens a new request, right? So a whole lot of ways, depending on what kind of user you are. If you're beginning, if you're more comfortable with mouse, then you can just go ahead and click on new HTTP request. If you're more of a power user, you can just use any of the shortcuts that's available, and that is the way you can just open a new request.
Yeah, I was actually trying to look at our Learning Center docs just to see if there was like listed the shortcuts. Maybe that's something we need to update as well, and we can send that forward. So just so people kind of understand the VS Code. So are these are VS Code specific shortcuts, correct, for Postman?
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Yeah, so let's keep going. I think so I think Kevin just posted a link about where those shortcuts are posted, so you can kind of take a look there as well on the marketplace documentation. But I think Yuri, you were planning, or sorry, actually, I think Pankaj, you were planning to show one more example using WebSockets as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think we are at like 45 minutes. Should I go ahead?
Yeah, so let's show go through the WebSockets example, because we also have a question about multiple protocols, and maybe this is a great place to kind of address that. I think we have a question from Mark about GraphQL requests, but Giri, did you want to chat a little bit about the protocols that VS Code currently supports, and then we can kind of go into WebSockets?
Yeah, so I think the Postman VS Code currently supports HTTP, gRPC, and WebSocket. We do have support for GraphQL in HTTP, but we don't have the new GraphQL client that you might see on the Postman app fully in VS Code yet. That is also something that we are working on. Apart from that, Postman also supports from last month we started supporting MQTT. Which is available on the app, but not yet available on VS Code. So overall, we support HTTP, WebSocket, and gRPC, and GraphQL inside HTTP itself.
Yeah, all right. And then one more question that I just got is, can forks and pull requests be performed through VS Code?
Not right now. That's also something that we are working on, which will be released later in the future.
Right.
So, I mean, there was a question earlier that asked what is possible in VS Code and what is not. I think we have also covered a fair bit of that now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I think ultimately, like, the idea here is to have this one synced place to work while you're building out your development. And then all of everything that you are doing here eventually is syncing with your web client app, correct? As well. All right.
We want to bring all the collaboration features to VS Code as well, because we think that collaboration also happens in VS Code at some level. You're already using Git to collaborate with your team on the code, and we want Postman's collaboration features also on VS Code.
Yeah. Nice. Since we've been answering a lot of questions as we've been demoing, I think we can kind of go forward with that other WebSockets example, and then we can kind of share some resources towards the end. But so yeah, I'll kind of let you keep driving it, Pankaj, in general.
Definitely. Let's say there's a requirement that we need to kind of, on real-time basis, we need to show or broadcast all of the things that's happening with the Notes app. Like if there's any notes a node created, any node deleted, or if there's a request to get all the notes, right? So I have another file. Let's say what you can do is we can use WebSocket for these real-time communication, and that is a good protocol for if you want to do any kind of real communication with the clients or anyone who is connected to that resource, right? So what I'll do is I'll first go ahead and import a WebSocket client that I have created. Let's just go ahead and add WebSocket. And it has a named export. I'll just do WebSocket client, right? And then when you have the WebSocket client available, I'll just do setup. So whenever our Postman, the Express app is running, we'll also set up the WebSocket client to start up, right? Another thing that I need to just do is to make sure that we have a function called broadcast message, which was so far doing just logging the data in the console. Going ahead, what we'll do is also broadcast this to any client that might be connected to our WebSocket servers, right? So I'll just go ahead and broadcast messages and pass in the same data, right? Now, just to showcase this, what I'll do is, let's see if our terminal is running or not. I'll just close this. I'll just go ahead and run this thing again, right? So if you see, our server is running on port 3000 and our WebSocket server is running on port 8000, right? So what I'll do is I'll create a new WebSocket request. I'll just type in the URL. I'll just add the port and I click on connect, right? So the moment I click on connect, this is now connected to this particular WebSocket server, right? So any kind of real-time data that is being published by the server will be available to this particular client, right? To showcase this, let's go ahead and split this thing so that we can on real-time see what are the data being, what exactly is happening with the Notes app, right? So yeah, and let's expand this a bit, open this get all notes. click on it. And if you remember, this is the one which gets all the nodes. I click on it, and this just returns us with node. And if you see, similarly at the same time, we received a message on the WebSocket client that we retrieved a total of 1 nodes, right? Similarly, if you go ahead and create a new node, because I have some data in here, I'll just change it, test for WebSocket. I save it and I click on send. So the moment we created the new node, the message appeared on the WebSocket client that a new node got added with the title test for WS, right? So this is how, if you see, like we also provide the support for WebSocket. So if you're working on any kind of WebSocket HTTP or gRPC APIs, all you need to do is just install this extension, and you can just start working and debugging those APIs right through your IDE itself.
Awesome. Yeah, no, this was a really interesting demo, especially showing how you can use WebSocket requests and how you're able to kind of do that live. So with that, we have about like 10 minutes left, and it seems like we've gone through a lot of questions. Is there anything else you guys wanted to kind of talk about? I think we had talked earlier a little bit about documentation as well.
Yes, just last 2 things. One is the documentation part. So essentially, because we created a collection, so we only need to know the more context about these collections, like what exactly this collection do, right? That is where the documentation comes into picture, so that you can just add all the relevant information about this API, so that you can share it, so that whenever a person or a teammate who is working on the same collection, they have an idea about what this particular collection corresponds to. So that is where the whole documentation comes into picture, and you can just go ahead and add any kind of context. So this is collection. I just go ahead and add collection for the Notes app created for demo purpose, right? So at least let's say if I go ahead and share this collection with Giri, right? So he'll be aware that this is a collection which is being used for the demo purposes, and we created for the webinar, right? So now the other question that comes into picture is like how we can share this collections, right? So if you go ahead and if you hover over here, you'll see a link that appears, which is copy link to collection, right? And when I click on it, what will happen is I'll get a URL copied to my clipboard, right? And all I need to do is just go ahead and share with my teammates anywhere by any channel, and they'll be able to access these collections on their Postman app or Postman web, right? So just to give you an idea, because I clicked on it, so I have my URL available on the clipboard. I'll just go to Chrome, open this, click on paste in here, and when I enter this, so this will load the Postman app or Postman web. And if you see, this is the collection that we were working. This is the documentation that was there, and all the APIs that we created. Apart from this, we also have the environments that we created and all the history that was sent while we were demoing this whole workspace and the VS Code extension. So yeah, so if you recall the whole thing, that why we did this, so this is also one of the major factor, which is the collaboration part, wherein like none of your data is lost, none of thing is happening in silos. Everything is shared with your teammates, so you can just go deeply collaborate with the teammates.
Right.
Just to add to this, one thing I would point is that even though VS Code does not have like all the features, you can still use VS Code extension for your primary workflows and continue with your secondary workflows either on the app or web. So you're still creating your collections on Postman workspaces. So these workspaces are accessible through the app, the web, and everywhere else. So nothing is siloed inside the VS Code extension or anything. You're always connected to the Postman cloud, and that's why we want you to sign in, which is the mandatory step for the VS Code app itself.
Great.
So you can use Runner, you can use Fork, you can do all of that stuff on the web or the app after getting your collection done on the VS Code extension itself.
Nice. Yeah, this was a really great, insightful overview of basically what the VS Code currently has and what its current capabilities are. And it sounds like we have a lot of plans of what we want to do in the future as well. So thank you so much, Pankaj, for sharing such an insightful demo. I think a lot of our attendees really enjoyed it as well. I wanted to just kind of go back to a little bit of like some of our future thoughts around VS Code as well, what we're thinking about about and kind of how Postman works when it comes to working with features that maybe the community requests. So Giri, did you want to share a little bit of your thoughts there as well?
Yeah, so the link you see here is the link to our GitHub Postman issues page. And if you can navigate to this, I can probably share what we do here. So this is the place where our users request for features or get in touch with us if they want to share any ideas or any issues that they face. This is a public open GitHub issue tracker. And this is where we interact with our users. And we take the community very seriously. We build around the community on what users want and what they're looking for. And I would highly like, advise you all to come chat with us over here. If you have any ideas, if you have any, suggestions for not just the VS Code editor, but also for the app, would recommend you to go through like the existing ones, or if you have something new, you can post it here. And this is how we build Postman itself along with the community. And that's what we want to do in the future as well. So I highly recommend and appreciate if you could, come here. And one more thing, probably request is if you do like the VS Code extension, you can rate us on the VS Code marketplace. So this is a separate marketplace that Microsoft owns, where you can talk about what you liked about the extension so that others can also benefit out of this. So you can just write a review here if you like our product.
Yeah, awesome. No, this was really insightful. And I think we kind of went through quite a lot. We have 5 minutes left. And it looks like we've answered a lot of the questions as we were talking about. It seems like, just to summarize, the current extension allows developers to work in the VS Code IDE and collaborate with other developers. It kind of minimizes the friction of your workflow, and basically all of your requests are also synced to your web application as well. So it looks like we had some questions about like collection runner and things like that, but it looks like those are some future requests that this product is evolving. So I guess this product is consistently evolving, right? So Giri and Pankaj, you both work together in terms of like how do you kind of evaluate and evolve features as we go forward? Just some questions for you guys in terms of like your process.
Maybe I can answer that. So what we try to do is try to cover the primary workflow of our users on where they find value in, and then try to build the secondary or complementary workflows that go well with this. And VS Code by large is the current state of VS Code by large is you see that in action. So when we build this out, we ensure that we have all the capabilities of the API client right inside VS Code itself. We didn't miss out even the smallest of bits, like searching over a response or going through the response time waterfall or anything like that. So we ensured that all the parts of the API client are available in VS Code, because this is where most of our users use Postman for. And we try to build complementary features that go well with this primary action for what our users use Postman for. This includes things like collections, collaboration, runner, and all these things. So that's how we usually try to prioritize. And for new features on the app, what we try to do is we try to see how many people are facing this problem. So it's slightly a different game when it comes to app, because we have to see how many users face this problem, what's the depth of this problem, and all these sorts to evaluate what to pick up next.
Yeah, definitely. We had one question about just like at the demo that we showed some of the sample code. I will, if you don't mind, Pankaj, maybe that's something we can share out to our community as well. And then we have some additional resources for you all as well. We have some links to our Postman Intergalactic event, where this recording, as well as some other recordings of all of the other features that we have going on at Postman. We have some links to our quick start, as well as our community forum, which is a great place for anybody to answer and ask questions. Our moderator, Kevin, who's been answering some of your questions, is highly active on this community forum as well, answering a lot of questions. So if you have any more questions, he mentioned that you can always reach out to the support at Postman or answer or ask any questions for your communication on our community forum, and we're actively moderating that as well. But this was such a great session, and I actually posted a link to our survey as well. So if you enjoyed this session and you thought this was insightful, feel free to take our survey just to kind of give us a little bit more insight into how we can do this better as well. So with that, did you guys want to have any last words before we kind of end the stream? Giri, Pankaj?
No, I think there's been an amazing crowd so far. I think for both me and Pankaj, this is the first time we are doing a webinar. So any feedback on how we can make this better, what sort of demos you're looking for would be great. And I think I had a lot of fun answering questions and, giving my piece of brain about how we look at things at Postman.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm glad that we were able to answer a lot of your questions live and kind of go through that demo as well. So we'll be, after this webinar ends, we'll be sending out all of the resources, the recordings, and some of the links we shared, such as like the issue tracker and a lot of the other issues, community forums as well. So with that, I wanted to end this stream. I wanted to thank you both, Giri and Pankaj, for collaborating with me on doing this session. I think this was really insightful for our community, and it sounds like we've had some people that really enjoyed it as well. So with that, thank you, everyone, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll be on a lookout for some resources from the Postman team. So I hope everyone has a great day going forward. Goodbye, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have a great
you.
day.
See you. Have a great day.